Funds meeting, and I'm not sure everyone might have been in that meeting, so I just did want to rewind a little bit and give some background. So as you guys all know, MIB Agents funds are a research program, and our research budget really comes from all the funds raised by you, our family funds, with money that's specifically designated for research. And you fund that in honor of your loved ones. And you're all really familiar with our Outsmarting Osteosarcoma grant program, which it's a pretty traditional model in that we put out a request for applications where we know kind of what our funding priorities and focus areas are. And then usually an individual investigator or sometimes two collaborators might then submit an application for a specific project at their lab at their specific institution. So that's kind of how our Outsmarting program works, which again is very similar to other grant programs. And in the past couple of years, we introduced a Young Investigator grant, which has been a wonderful way to really support early scientists working in this field, and also maybe try to pivot them to kind of focus their careers on osteosarcoma. So there's been an exciting new $15 million collaborative osteosarcoma research initiative. And it's collaborative both in scientific approach as well as in the funding model. And the idea for this was really seeded a couple of years ago by Matt Tishner, who's dad to Willie Tishner, an osteo angel, who also founded OSI, the Osteosarcoma Institute, and Quad W, and also Dr. Lee Hellman, who is a longtime physician scientist who's focused his career in osteosarcoma and is also director of the OSI. And so this we've kind of talked to Breakthrough Cancer and Mac and Lee about this approach, and MIB Agents is really excited about it. And we feel that this project really aligns with both our organization's mission and our values and its collaborative nature. And we recommend supporting this initiative with some of our research budget in tandem with our Outsmarting Osteosarcoma grant program. And so this initiative would be managed and steered by Breakthrough Cancer and is different from our Outsmarting funding model. So we wanted to invite the BTC team here today to just kind of give you guys an overview, since you guys are all key stakeholders who fund our research budget. So I'm very excited to welcome both Lisa Schwartz, who's the COO at Breakthrough Cancer, and Jesse Boehm, who's the Chief Science Officer. And I'll turn it over to you guys. And actually, before I forget, I'm also going to hit record if everyone's okay with that.
I hit it.
Oh, did I already hit? Thank you, Anne. Thank you, my wing person. Thanks.
So maybe we should introduce ourselves. Lisa, do you want to go? Do you want to go first?
Sure. My name is Lisa Schwartz, as Christina said, and I know a few of you luckily on this call. I've been the Chief Operating Officer and the Chief Philanthropy Officer of Breakthrough Cancer since we started in 2021 and helped to bring the foundation to fruition in the couple of years before that. I would add one thing to, and we can talk about what makes Breakthrough Cancer unique and what we think of as special and different, and what we think we could bring to a program in osteosarcoma. But I would also be remiss in not crediting Alejandro Sweet Cordero for also being instrumental in bringing the idea of taking on osteosarcoma to Breakthrough Cancer. I know Alejandro is well known to many of you. He's also well known to us for a few reasons. Alejandro is not only a treasured member of our scientific advisory board, but he's also a former trainee in our president's lab. So that was many years ago, but Alejandro trained in Tyler Jacks's lab, and they've remained friendly and collegial ever since. I won't say the number of years that has elapsed between the time that Alejandro was in Tyler's lab and then became an independent investigator and clinician on his own. But he came to us with such passion about osteosarcoma and such frustration that he made everybody sit up and listen. And so I just want to give that shout out to Alejandro. So Jesse, let me turn it back to you for a sec.
Sure. So as Christina mentioned, Jesse Boehm, Chief Science Officer, and Lisa and I are two members of what's now a 20-person team who typically sits in the room, even though it's after hours, where Lisa is, right in Kendall Square. And I think you'll find this is a group of people who have really led with passion into the nonprofit space, wanting to work together to try to transform the status quo because of frustrations we've all felt in how cancer research works, is operationalized or is not operationalized, and sometimes falls short of achieving the mission that we all wanted to achieve. That's, for me, the reason that I got involved. I worked at the Broad Institute right close by in Kendall Square for 15 years, getting excited about team science. I call myself a collaboration evangelist. And for me, it was personal because of my wife getting diagnosed with a tongue cancer during graduate school. We realized that I had to focus my career on delivering value as rapidly as possible to patients wherever they were. And I couldn't really put my own ego or my own institution at the top of the heap. I really had to lead by bringing people together. And I think many of us have felt that and seen that, both in terms of our personal experiences, but also our sense that the challenges for cancer are bigger than, one lab or one institution or sometimes even one nationality, and they require bringing people together with diverse expertise in new ways. But our standard funding models, of course, despite lots of new experiments, mostly fund individual researchers, sometimes collaborations between a couple of folks. But about 20 years ago, many of us saw the Human Genome Project and the cancer projects that evolved. And we've all seen with COVID vaccines recently, just the potential that resource and teamwork can bring to previously intractable problems. And so that's kind of the spirit that we're trying to bring to this new organization. It's a foundation. It's a nonprofit organization, but we do more than issue funds or organize funds. We try to grow and develop teams and team culture. We try to focus individuals on vision and on impact. And we try to help professionally manage or support the professional management of activities because, as we all know, scientists sometimes are not the world's most professional managers of science. They often have great ideas. And so we try to provide all of that in addition to acting as a convener. And I can say a bit more about how Breakthrough Cancer works, but I think that's the essence in a nutshell. The organization was launched with a initial pledge of funds from the Goodwin family, initially with $250 million. And we've put about $100 million in motion towards team labs. We call our virtual communities of scientists that work together to tackle a problem a team lab, because they're really a new type of virtual lab that works together, shares together, moves things together in a real way. And we've tested this concept of bringing team science to several disease areas, including ovarian cancer and pancreatic cancer and GBM and AML, and are now trying to recruit additional partners so that we can take the Breakthrough Cancer experiment to the many other tumor types that we're now being asked and invited to try to tackle. I think the concept here is to try to work with members of the osteosarcoma community. We're not osteosarcoma experts. I run a research lab at MIT. We've done a tiny bit of pediatric cancer research in the past, a very, very tiny bit of osteo research, but by no means are we experts. But we try to act as a convener to bring together communities to try to identify what's really needed to transform the field, to really lock into the vision that's over the horizon that might be a decade or more off. And then to ask a very simple question: why can't we reach for that vision today? What's missing? What are the barriers? What's getting in our way? And then, are those real barriers, or are they technology barriers? Are they social barriers? Are they resourcing barriers? What are they? And what are the initial steps that we can take to show that those barriers can be definitively knocked down and overcome? And we feel if we can show through proof of concept teamwork that the fundamental barriers can be overcome, lots of new ideas and people and sometimes resource can pour in and finish solving the problem definitively. So I can show this maybe in graphical form if it's helpful. The concept looks a bit like this. Asking what the ultimate ambition is for the field. We have initiatives that have a public health component. We have initiatives that have a therapeutics component. We have initiatives that test new scientific ideas in mice or in cells and dishes. But what are we actually trying to do for patients around the country and around the world? What are the barriers? And then where do we start and show that those barriers can be overcome? And this is where we grow teams. to show that those barriers can be overcome. And once they're overcome, the solutions in some cases can be scaled. In other programs, the initial concept can sometimes become a new type of clinical trial in which new scientific ideas are tested in patients quite quickly to figure out if the idea is correct. And if that new type of clinical trial can show proof of concept, it's possible for that concept to scale. So that's in essence, I think, what we're trying to do. In the case of the osteosarcoma work, we're at a really exciting inflection point. Because of this really generous support and push in this direction, and the sense that this is bigger than any one institution, a number of stakeholders, scientists from not just the United States, but actually from Canada and the UK and the United States, have all come together over the last couple of months and will be joining us in person next week in the room that Lisa is sitting in front of to begin to push and pull at this question. We've written a vision document. We're happy to share it with you with an initial group of stakeholders. You'll recognize them: Katie Janeway and Alejandro Sweet Cordero and Damon Reed and Richard Gorlick and a few others. We've begun to develop a plan or a sense of where the field might be headed. And what we're going to be challenging the stakeholders to do in person is to give us pieces of the vision for how we might get towards that plan. In the meeting in person, we'll share ideas and we'll begin coalescing possible team labs that might come together and make use of this enormously generous resource that folks are pulling together. And based on the ideas that come out of the workshop, we're going to work closely with the scientists over the next 3 to 4 months to try to mature the very best concept or concepts. And we hope to be in a place to invite a written proposal later this year, and if all goes well, fund and launch a team lab by early next year. We don't have perfect clarity on what the goal of the project will be because we're still learning from the stakeholders in the community what the fundamental barriers are. But I can tell you thus far, sorry if I'm rambling on for too long, I don't know if this is helpful. So far, the scientists have written down some pretty fundamental barriers that I'm sure frustrate all of you. The challenge of a rare tumor and the challenge of a bone tumor, of course, make the research enterprise that much more difficult. But there are some new technologies the scientists are hopeful for that might show progress, especially in figuring out how every single cell in a bone actually works and interacts with its partners. Those technologies actually really weren't even around a couple of years ago and are now ready to be put to the test to understand healthy bone and also diseased bone. The team has expressed frustration, as I'm sure all of you have felt, that great ideas, great therapeutic ideas just aren't being unearthed fast enough and tested fast enough. And in patients, we try to do things in mice or in cells, and that's all good, but really nothing can help us answer the question as fast as what we often call science in patients. Do the experiment, figure out, was our therapeutic idea correct or not? And so there's a hunger for a new type of rapid trials kind of framework where lots of ideas can be tested quite quickly, and then all of the samples and all of the data and all of the information can be shared broadly so we can all learn very quickly which ideas are the best or not. And then the final, I think, barrier that folks have expressed a lot of frustration about is just biopharma isn't really focused on this space as much as they should be. We and others think that every drug company should have a program in this space. There's such a need. The hunger for new therapeutic ideas is tremendous, but because of all the other complexities, because it's rare, because there hasn't been, an initiative as large as what we're proposing, it's been too easy for major biopharma companies to go work on other projects. And so we hope that by really working together at a new scale with an unprecedented vision, we'll be able to recruit new technology companies and also new biopharma companies into this space. And maybe the first therapeutic ideas will be great ones, maybe not. But we think if we can recruit a lot of interest back into the space, we can iterate rapidly and get to therapeutic ideas that are correct as quickly as possible. So we'll report back what comes out of the workshop, but again, that's the overall frame. It's what's the vision? How are we going to start and get there? How are we going to grow a team? and who's going to actually do the work and receive funds. And I guess the final thing I'll mention, and maybe Lisa, this is what you're trying to flag me to mention, is that our teams are constituted of people across different institutions. We don't have a research footprint ourselves. We help to provide the funds that are grown together with partners to scientists across the country and likely around the world, but they work together as if they're part of the same team. They have lab meetings twice a month. We help to manage a shared cloud environment where they exchange data in real time. There's professional managers, and we have Lisa's team has contracts support to reduce a lot of the back end barriers that often get in the way. So we try to, it's not perfect yet, we're still learning, but we try to make it just as easy as possible for team science to really thrive. And we've learned a lot from the other projects, you know, how to get better and better at that. And so I think there'll be a lot of leverage here. And if this was the first project, we would make a lot of mistakes. We'll still make a couple of mistakes, but we'll make way fewer mistakes because we've learned all the way from earlier projects. So we're really excited to take this on. And since we're only about 2 to 3 years into the organization, we think this is the perfect time, you know, to launch a new initiative. And I'm pretty confident that something extraordinary is going to come out of this. We're challenging. What I'm saying to the scientists as we plan for the workshop is I want us all to look back at the end of our careers and recognize that this was the inflection point in which something new was created, in which a new movement began that was the beginning of the steps towards solving the problem. I don't want to look back and say we missed the opportunity, say it was just another project. We have to look back and cite this as an indelible inflection point. And sometimes people, you know, chat me in the Zoom and say, yeah, that's exactly the type of, you know, attitudinal shift that we need. Everyone feels that, of course, but it's too tempting just to chase the next grant and to do the next thing. We have to look back on this with that, you know, kind of level of seriousness. So maybe I'll stop there. Happy to answer a lot of questions. And Lisa, I don't know if there's anything I forgot to mention.
So, Jesse, what I'm hoping that you'll do is tell people about our commitment to data science. Ali had a question in the chat about are we utilizing or planning to utilize AI? And so if you could speak a little bit about our data science efforts, and Anne had a question in the chat that perhaps you could talk about what our colleague John Grabenstatter is doing in trying to bring pharma together with our research efforts.
Yeah, I think great scientific ideas are great ideas, but they need a lot of support actually to have the impact, obviously, that we'd all like for them to have on society. And often we find that funding agencies, especially even the National Cancer Institute, who's quite generous, can sometimes underfund some of the essential elements like data science and data analysis that are needed for science to really have as big of an impact as possible. We've done the opposite. We've made a $25 million commitment to data science. And what this means is that there's a team of about 50 individuals across multiple cancer centers around the United States that have expertise in a number of different areas. How do you analyze tumors from blood samples with ultra-sensitive kind of technologies and analyze that data? How do you look at a piece of a tumor under a microscope and really analyze the data from every single cell and how it's talking to every other cell so you know what's happening after you provide a therapeutic? And yes, from an AI perspective, how do we leverage all of the data that's already been collected, not only in adult cancers, but in pediatric cancers, and train algorithms to do things like predicting the right immunological targets for vaccines and for things like that. So we've brought together about 50 people's worth of expertise, and those people are being flexibly deployed to support new disease projects. So when an osteosarcoma project gets launched, we'll be able to leverage a slice of that investment to support this work. We find that the technology and data science frontiers that glioblastoma and pancreatic cancer and ovarian cancer face have some differences, but often share some common threads. And so rather than every disease area building its own data science infrastructure, we've invested in this common frame. There's also data engineering and mathematics. By data engineering, what I mean is taking a piece of computational code that might work on someone's computer and running it in an environment like on the internet or on the cloud where everyone can run it in a seamless way. So, you know, the difference between a clunky bit of code and like an app on your phone that works really well every time. So there's a series of data engineers that are working to pipeline. That really means like professionally code software to support this work. So that's kind of data science. We'll have to figure out which parts of data science and machine learning and AI expertise are needed based on the ideas from the osteosarcoma team, but we're confident that that expertise is there. In terms of the other question about the biopharma partnerships, that's of course a challenge for biopharma, and we can think about small companies and large companies. They have some different pressures, of course, but if we think about what they want to do, they want to develop a technology, they want to develop drugs, but to test those drugs, they have to work with academic organizations or hospitals to run clinical trials. And where things often get slowed down is the need to work with cancer centers one at a time. And as you know, for a rare disease, working with cancer centers one at a time slows things down even further. So what we try to do is to bring together the business development and tech transfer and contracting expertise across multiple cancer centers, talk together about how to work with industry en masse, and then support some of the relationship building and some of the contracting that's required to make that as simple as possible. We're not quite there yet. It depends a bit on the frame of which project wants to do which activity, but I think we're learning for clinical trial activities that begin at one cancer center, being able to clone some of that at other centers can move a bit faster. And Lisa mentioned my colleague, John Grabenstatter. This is someone who came over from one of the big cancer vaccine companies called BioNTech, who was one of the companies that made the COVID vaccines. And John's joined us to help to streamline some of the industry interactions. And so he's on point once he hears what are the companies that the osteosarcoma folks are going to want to really work with. He's on point to help build those relationships and drive them forward. I'll just give one example. Sorry if I'm speaking too much. One example where you're familiar in osteosarcoma, of course, that the genetic material is so scrambled, it's very confusing. That pattern, which is pretty unusual, is also seen a bit in ovarian cancer, which is another tumor we work on. The outcomes are very different, the diseases are very different, but there's some technology companies that are now building new tools to look in a blood sample and to track this type of confused genome in the blood. And our ovarian teams and John were already building a relationship with one of these companies. And so we think we're going to be able to leverage that relationship likely for this project as well. So even though those are very different diseases, from a technology and industry perspective, that may be something we're able to leverage. And that's, I think, part of the wisdom, I hope it's wisdom, of launching a portfolio across different disease areas with some of these cross-cutting technology and data science and contracting threads. And time will tell whether that that has been a recipe for success. But my prediction is that it will pay off. I don't know if all this is helpful. Please keep asking questions. I could obviously go on for a long time.
Yeah, no, this has been great. But yeah, family friends, please feel free to either just chime in. We're a small enough group. You can also just, I think, chime in with your question, or if you're more comfortable, put it in the chat. I'll throw out one while people are thinking of their questions. So a couple actually instances you mentioned where you were kind of leveraging learning from these other disease groups, and I'm just wondering how you've operationalized that, that you make sure that you are leveraging learning across the groups.
Yeah, we often there's some directed ways, and then there's some less directed ways. I think what we find is that leadership of a particular quality is extremely important. That won't be a surprise to any of you in business, but for those of you in who have been proximal to science for long enough, often other qualities are selected for individual brilliance or creativity, which are all important. But I think leadership of a complex team is a bit of a different beast. And so what often PIs ask early on in a project is, how have other leaders in other teams addressed some of the complex issues of making decisions as a team, or in dealing with conflict if two people disagree on a path forward, or how do you support junior people who are very vulnerable, of course, in their careers, while at the same time harnessing their creativity. And I think great leadership and mentorship can explain that and kind of make it work. So Christina, one of the things we try to do is to match make. Sometimes I find myself making human connections between people, even within the same institution, but from a different disease area, that a researcher might speak with who might be a good mentor from a leadership perspective. So that's kind of one thing. I think in addition, some of the more tactical elements in terms of management, we're trying to get better and better. And what I mean by this is we recognize that to make a complex project like this successful, you need great project management at each cancer center. However, project management costs money, and funders often don't provide enough money to both make data and manage a project. And so when funding is tight, the first thing that goes is the project management, because of course the funder is saying, make more data. That's really cool. So I think in the beginning, we were a bit neutral. We explained the importance of management, but we sort of let scientists choose their own adventures. But I think those scientists and we have seen that it's much better to have invested in management. So I think, Christina, another thing we do is to try to help our colleagues identify management, sometimes recruit project managers, and then we provide a dedicated staff member from Breakthrough Cancer Central who acts as an air traffic controller for all the managers. And how you actually add value in that way is complex. And so we're learning time and time again. We're not sitting at the lab bench every day making the data, making data, but a lot of it is how do you influence complex outcomes from afar. So that kind of influencing without authority kind of concept becomes important. And then finally, on the data science side of things, Christine, I think the lessons learned from one team quickly become lessons in another team. I gave an example on the biopharma interactions, but we see it in other places as well, that a new algorithm that is developed for pancreas cancer in one academic's lab, the data science team can help to port that over and make it available to other scientists at other organizations, kind of reducing that cycle time. So those are some of the things we do, but to be honest, it's still a work in progress. I think that we've all lamented the challenges with team science probably for our whole lives, or the slowness in cancer for our whole lives. And we're 3 years in, I think, to a new frontier. This is coming at a time where there are a number of pushes nationally to reform how biomedical science is organized. You may have heard a bit about some of the national experiments, particularly an organization called ARPA-H, which is trying to run big biomedicine projects within the federal government, like DARPA, which is known from the Defense DoD, the Department of Defense organization that has DARPA as a large organization to tackle mission-driven projects. Just a few years ago, a healthcare version of DARPA was launched called ARPA-H, and they too have this audacious, significant model for team science. That's not a cancer-focused push, but many of the scientists we interact with are hearing both from us and from ARPA and from other organizations about the importance of moving in this direction. And some of the lessons are being passed between those organizations. So this is the perfect time for this as well.
I would just add to what Jesse has said, another thing that we do that I think has been pivotal to Breakthrough Cancer, and we're coming into our 3rd annual summit, Breakthrough Cancer Summit. And this is a 2.5 to 3 day meeting where we bring all of our funded investigators together with our scientific advisory board, our board of directors. We also include members of our participating institutions who focus on things like legal contracts, grants, sponsored research, things like that. And we bring everybody together in a closed setting. And Jesse and our president, Tyler, will kick off a meeting in which each team is invited to present to everyone else. And so that's how some of this cross-pollination happens, because the ovarian team is hearing from the glioblastoma team, and they're saying, wait a minute, we could have some similarities. I could have a technology that could impact your early detection or things like that. And there's a fair amount of social engineering at that meeting, where we put people together because we want conversations to happen. And so the ovarian people aren't just sitting with the ovarian people. The ovarian people are mixed with everybody. And Jesse's bringing up ARPA-H was perfect because last year the head of ARPA-H joined us at the summit to talk about synergies between Breakthrough Cancer and ARPA-H. And we also had a colleague from the National Cancer Institute who was talking about, and Tyler, Jesse, and these folks from ARPA and NCI led a conversation about team science. Jesse's also being modest. He and Tyler just wrote an article for Cancer Discovery, Jesse, am I saying this correctly? The journal Cancer Discovery, about the importance of team science. And it was based on interviews that Jesse and colleagues did with everyone from Stand Up to Cancer, Parker Institute for Cancer Immunotherapy, Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, and other foundations about how they are thinking about team science. So we do a lot of this engineering, and we think it helps our teams to learn from each other.
Because I was too modest to even mention it. Brought it up. No, we can send this around. I think
we can send it.
Lisa's right. I think Christina, the real answer to your question is it's a lot of cultural engineering and social engineering, as Lisa mentioned. Scientists are people too, and they're complicated, like we're all complicated. But the essence of how do you reunite to purpose and build culture and sustain trust is just as important in this community here as it is within the scientific community. So we've boiled down these 6 kind of fundamental elements, called hallmarks, of what makes real, authentic team science for cancer successful. You can read about the description of each one, but we've tried to boil down what makes this really work. We have tried to brand a new form of collaboration, radical collaboration, because we think that the word collaboration, and frankly, even the word team science, is thrown around so much, it almost doesn't mean anything. You know, we divide money into 2 halves and tell the funder we're collaborating, and that's collaboration. Like that's not actually collaboration. So I think we've tried to communicate that to radically collaborate means to be open in a different way. It means to share a vision. It means to lead with purpose, with an intent to catalyze, not to dominate. It means that our incentives have to be aligned to solve the problem as opposed to, advance our own egos. We have to share things in real time and support each other. And then we have to support this all on the back end. And that's kind of what makes this new form of interaction successful. It looks better on a slide than it works in reality, but I think we're trying to get there. We try to hold this up as the North Star of what we're trying to achieve. And part of the motivation for working in as many disease areas as possible with as many organizational partners as possible is we learn something new from each interaction, and then we can pass that on to other disease communities. I've spent a lot of time with rare cancer foundations over the last 10 years. I recognize that there are many individual challenges that each rare disease community faces that are totally different from each other, but there are also a set of shared challenges and interactions that aren't so unique because everyone suffers from them, together. And so how do we pass some of the knowledge on from one project to the next, I think becomes important. So we can send this around. It's a 3-page document, so you can read it if you're bored at night. But I think it's an interesting encapsulation of what we've done so far.
I just put the PDF in the chat for people.
Thanks,
There will be
Lisa.
a quiz. There'll be a quiz at the end of the half hour.
Any other questions?
Trying
Well, I
to
just have a kind of a general question. So, osteosarcoma research is a real resource-constrained environment, I guess. And I wonder, is there a consensus out there amongst the people you've already talked to about what's missing? And and with more resources that, something could be a game changer or step change in the way things are approached?
Yeah, Jim, it's becoming a bit more crystallized as we work. There's a current draft, happy to send it around, of what this group of champions, or this proto group of champions that we call them, have written. that address these two questions. I think these are kind of your questions. What must be achieved over the next decade, and what are the barriers? I can maybe I'll do a brief synopsis, but I can't promise it's perfect. I think the essence is that when people began analyzing these tumors, some tumors like some types of skin cancer, some type of lung cancer, there was something in the genome that jumped out right away. You may have heard of the EGFR protein in lung cancer or the BRAF protein in melanoma. And melanoma used to be a type of cancer that not a lot of people worked on, universally fatal. But as soon as people found this BRAF gene, companies knew how to target it. Everyone rushed back in, and that kind of didn't happen in this disease because the genome is so complicated. And so with that complexity produces new opportunities, but it wasn't so simple. So this kind of precision medicine transformation just kind of bypassed osteosarcoma and moved on. So that's kind of fundamental. We think what's needed is to be able to take the genetic material of a patient and make a prediction about what drug or drugs will work for that patient, but we don't know all the recipes yet for exactly how to do that. So we have to build data. There's kind of a lot of missing data that's needed to fuel the type of machine learning algorithms and prediction of the future. And we don't have data because we have data, but we don't have enough data because of the rarity of the disease and because of the fact that we're dealing with bone. This is a hard tissue to get samples of. We're careful. We don't want to sample a lot, especially because of the pediatric or adolescent nature of the patients. But without taking those samples, it's hard to really collect information. So we have to figure out how to collect all that data, despite it being rare and despite it being bone. And we think there's some ways of doing that and moving ahead. There are new technologies, as I mentioned, that will get us there if we can get those samples in the lab. And then we have to provide a clear roadmap for biopharma. I think if Novartis asks researcher one, what are the best therapeutic ideas for osteosarcoma? They might suggest 7 things. And if they ask researcher two might suggest 7 other things. And if they ask researcher 3, they might suggest 7 other things. And I think if there's no clear roadmap, it's going to be hard to galvanize stakeholders to get involved. That doesn't mean that anyone knows the right answer, but we have to work together as a community and provide a clear roadmap in a data-driven kind of manner. And so that, I think, Jim, is probably key to supporting biopharma engagement. And that roadmap, we think, will also be catalyzed by learning in patients, which is what I mentioned, before, where a drug might look good in a cell in a dish or in a mouse, but we are not sure if it will work in a human. And so it might take 10 years before we even do that experiment, but we should do that experiment quickly. And so this nature of a kind of a missing early trials consortium is, I think, something else that's been talked about. So those are kind of the barriers. It's bone and it's rare. There's no roadmap. There's an insufficient application of technology and expertise. There's been kind of a common lament, for reasons I don't fully understand personally, that applications of technology in this field can sometimes trail other cancers by a decade. And I don't think that's appropriate. This should be the most technological advanced, this should be the place where every new company wants to test their new technology. It's so fascinating scientifically, and there's so much opportunity. And there's no, kind of coordinated translational strategy. So those are some of the ideas, Jim, that are kind of beginning to percolate up. And one of the things we're going to do in the workshop is if those are the right problem statements, then what are some of the pieces of solution statements that might require investment? I'm suspicious that part of it's going to be generating more open source data that the whole world can leverage, so that every researcher doesn't have to make data him or herself, but anybody can wake up with all of the data and materials they need. It's probably going to be one part of it. And a second part of it, as I said, is probably figuring out how to test new ideas in patients or mice or dogs as quickly as possible.
Thanks. That's helpful. So, I think on that last point, I mean, my sense is there's a real dearth of biomarkers in this field.
Yes.
And that's the reason that, some therapies aren't be able to be assessed quickly enough. and, you know, the rapid mutations that occur that, you know, it's just, it makes it very, very difficult in humans. But if there were better biomarkers and that we prioritize that, it would, in my mind, facilitate the rest of the development. So.
And Jim, I can give you an example from another project. Glioblastoma, you know, advanced brain cancer, is pretty similar in the sense that the genome's complicated, not quite as complicated here, and a lot of therapies have failed. And in that kind of ideation process, the concern was that it's hard to model a brain in a dish. And so you have to actually test the therapy in the brain. And the hypothesis was that perhaps you could test a new therapeutic in the brain and then take a number of samples before, during, after, safely enough, so you could actually see in real time what was happening when you put that therapy into the brain. And could we learn from a very small number of patients whether we had the biomarker correct, or what was the biomarker, or, you know, was there something else we were missing? And so they developed a new clinical framework around longitudinal sampling, you know, repeat sampling. And they said, is any patient going to want to do that? And actually, lots of patients did want to do that. Is any, you know, review board going to want to support that? In fact, lots of them did. And so there was kind of a, you know, paternalism or maternalism saying, oh, we can't do that because no one would want to do it. But the patients said, of course we want to do that. And actually, as we've seen the data, in just 7 patients, they've collected like 400 biospecimens, made like 20,000 data points. And you can actually see that if you don't sample in this way, you would have missed exactly what's happening. That this kind of repeat sampling is telling you that this is what's happening to the biomarkers, and then they're going away. And we're hopeful, we're not 100% sure yet, but we're hopeful that that small group of patients, we're going to learn way more from them because of the depth of kind of sampling and analysis. And I think just the technologies just really weren't around to do that just a few years ago. And it probably wasn't safe enough. We had these like very fancy technologies to like go in and take many samples. I think the safety profile of those technologies just also wasn't good enough. So we're always, you know, trying to use whatever's at the cutting edge to solve the problem.
Thank you. That sounds very good.
Jesse and Lisa, I'm wondering if you can just, Lisa, you kind of touched on this a bit when you were talking about the annual meeting. But I just want to make sure everyone is aware, like in addition to the project management, the social engineering that BTC does, just the other infrastructure that BTC kind of brings to the table to help propel the work forward.
So Jesse mentioned that we are now a team of 20, and we've grown quite a bit since we started in 2021, where there were just 5 of us doing everything. On the science and program side, Jesse has quite a big team of people. Christy Schultz, excuse me, I'm forever confusing Schultz's and Schmidt's. Christy Schultz runs our programs team and reports to Jesse, and she works directly with our project liaisons. And those are the people who Jesse described that work hand in glove with each of our team labs to make sure that they not only are meeting and doing the things that they said that they were going to do when they first laid out their proposals. We're not like every other foundation who says, here's some cash, congratulations, and report back to us and tell us how you did. We actually want to see the Gantt chart. And scientists don't typically do Gantt charts. And so Jesse has people on his team and Christy's team who work with our teams to show them science can be laid out really systematically. And if you're not going to do experiment A on day B, please tell us why. And please update the Gantt chart so we know when to expect, because it is not good enough for us to know in a year that you didn't do that experiment because X, Y, and Z happened. We want to know now, and we want to be able to help people pivot now. So time is not wasted. We put a lot of stock in urgency, and I think Jesse's team of project liaisons and our programs lead, Christy, helps to bring that urgency and underscore it to all the team labs. Then we have John Grabenstatter, who, as you heard, works directly with industry and with the science teams to make sure that we're marrying the right industry partner with the right team lab and doing all the things that we need to do on the back end to get those groups aligned, whether it's NDAs, whether it's research collaboration agreements, whether it's clinical trial agreements, et cetera, so we can move the research forward more quickly, more systematically, more in a smarter fashion. On my side of the operation, we work on contracts and limited collaboration agreements to allow for lots of researchers and clinicians from institutions outside of our original 5 institutions. And if we have not told you the original 5, we've been remiss in telling you that the original 5 breakthrough cancer participating institutions are Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, MIT's Cancer Research Institute, the Koch Institute, Johns Hopkins Kimmel Cancer Center, Memorial Sloan Kettering, and MD Anderson. We have an agreement that allows for Christina or Anne or Jim or people from any institution who the team lab would like to bring in, who thinks that person or team could be additive to the research, to come in. So we work very closely with institutions from outside the participating institutions to make that happen. We also have an events team that, and we don't do a whole lot of events in a traditional manner, like a fundraising cocktail party that you might go to. And that's with, I love a good fundraising cocktail party and we need to do more of them. What I'm talking about are the events that bring our team labs together. We just had a group of our data scientists and team lab members from many different team labs meet in New York City for the past 2 days to do a hackathon. And one of our events team members was there making sure everything went well. They had the materials and the connectivity and food and Diet Coke that they needed to do a 2-day event at Memorial Sloan Kettering. Similarly, we'll have our same type of events focus on the osteosarcoma workshop next week. Then we have a philanthropy team. Jesse mentioned that we were started with a $250 million incredible gift from the Goodwin family. That gift was made to us as a challenge. We have to raise $250 million to unlock all of those funds. And so we work with other foundations, we work with individuals, we work with companies to try to leverage the money that they could bring in to create the largesse, the funding that the team labs need to be successful. And then on top of it all, we have Jesse, our Chief Science Officer, Tyler, our President, Mike Noble, our Chief Data Officer, our Chief Financial Officer, Bill Hume, who is a prince of a human being, and our Chief Communications Officer, it's getting late here, who herself lost a child to pediatric cancer, rhabdomyosarcoma. Am I right, Jesse? Rhabdomyosarcoma?
That's right.
And so people come to Breakthrough Cancer with an incredible passion for the work. Many of us are not scientists. Jesse, Tyler, Mike, and some of our, all 3 of our liaisons are PhD scientists. The rest of us are passionate hangers-on. And we've learned a lot from our colleagues like Jesse and Tyler and others, and we learn a lot from you. We're humbled to be doing this work, and I can't express to you how important it is to us to have this opportunity to talk to you, to think about osteosarcoma with you, and with our SAB and our board. It's work that we get to do.
We are on the same page, and I'm like trying so hard to like not jump out of my chair and be like, yes, yes.
You can use the emoji, Anne.
Huh?
You can use the emoji.
Oh my gosh, I should just use the emoji. I know. but the collaboration evangelist completely makes sense to me. Everybody who's on this call are absolutely in the same boat as you, with the same description as you. And we also believe in play and food and beverage and wine. And it's only when you get together, and I say this to people and they laugh, and I'm like, no,
Yeah.
No.
it's a real thing. This is the glue that holds us together. And my foundational thing on that was the first medical conference that I ever went to. The break had really, I'm going to go with shitty coffee. It was bad.
Oh, no.
What are you doing to me? So that was part one. And then kind bars and apples. Who talks to somebody else with an apple, like chewing an apple? I had to leave to get coffee. I was just like so cranky. Anyway, you'll see when you come to Factor, that's not who we are.
I have 3 words for you from our last summit. Warm cinnamon rolls.
All right.
Yes. Yes, queen. Okay, so I'm yes all day long, but I've been, more I have been available to you and you to us, to Christina and certainly Allie and I, but nobody else has. And I just, in our last couple minutes here, with all my yesing, if anybody has any, like, I have no idea what you're talking about, or like, I have a real problem with this situation, like, this is something we want everybody to understand and feel comfortable with, moving forward. So if you have any questions, like, if you've got the evangelist here and the passionate hanging on people, and like
I do like apples, so this might be a problem.
it might be where we part ways. But do you want to eat an apple while you're talking?
No,
to
I
the
don't.
camera?
No.
It's true. It's true.
Yeah, that's it. I love an apple too, just in the right, circumstances.
Does anyone have any other questions that they throw out now? And it isn't, speaking out forever, hold your peace. Like, you can obviously send us an email or follow up. Any other?
You can always drop us notes. I think a common concern with a large project is that it could get in the way of smaller things also. But I think I was trying to answer Jim's question before around that. I think building data and knowledge and solutions that everyone can share because of the explicitly open access nature of everything that we do, I don't believe should be viewed as a loss to any other part of the community. And I think actually that's what's happened with the right large cancer projects. They've provided a foundation that everyone has built off of. And I think we need to tell every researcher this should build something useful for them. And we'll see how quickly we can pull that off.
If there are no other questions, I might just kind of throw out one last one to wrap us up, which is, this is, a huge project, $15 million, which, by the way, Allie had to drop off, but she's been very instrumental, part of the team that's been going around raising funds to support this. And it's a larger team, it's a longer time horizon. I know you guys are used to our outstanding grants are usually 1 year. I believe the timeline for this project is 4 years. And so can you maybe talk a little bit about just reporting back to funders, or just, you kind of talked about, actually, I loved kind of the project management and kind of staying up to date with the scientific teams on kind of where they are. But can you maybe talk a little bit to this group as funders, how they might kind of stay abreast of what's happening and progress?
Yeah, I can start. Lisa, you might want to go into that in more detail. I think we're going to have to work with the funding groups to come up with the right kind of cadence and interaction that kind of works for everyone. We receive annual reports, and we participate in biweekly lab meetings, and we help to manage to Lisa called it a Gantt chart of milestones. And so we'll have a pretty intimate knowledge. I think for each funding group, what's useful to them at what cadence, we'll have to kind of map out. It could be that quarterly update meetings or something would be worthwhile. It could be that passing on the annual reports would also be worthwhile. Lisa, I don't know if we've totally, mapped that out. for this group, but I think that it's quite important to us that you feel fully engaged and everything feels fully transparent. We don't want to be a barrier to getting information. And of course, it's not about us at all. It's about you. So, but we don't overly tax the scientists. I guess that's the other question. So that's the other point. So Lisa, is there a recipe yet for exactly how we're going to do that?
So I think there's a bit of a recipe when you look at the relationship that we have with the Lustgarten Foundation. And unlike MIB and some of the work that Osteosarcoma Institute and Ali and Mike and others are trying to do to raise funds, and it's more of a coalition of funders that's being built, and that's a Jesse-ism, so I've taken it on as my own. With the Lustgarten Foundation, which is one foundation that supports pancreas cancer research, not just in the US, but in other countries as well. They have a scientific representative that will attend our SAB meetings when the topic of pancreas cancer is on the agenda. They receive our annual, the scientific leads of the Lustgarten Foundation receive our annual reports, and a group of our pancreas cancer fund researchers presents to the Lustgarten Scientific Advisory Board. And so I think when we talk about a coalition, Jesse's exactly right. Assuming that a project gets greenlit for funding and approved for greenlit by our SAB and approved for funding by our board, we would want to work with this whole network of people to say, what works for you? How do you feel about having perhaps some representatives attend different things? Or perhaps there's family funds meet. I think you all meet quite frequently. And if it would be helpful to have members of an osteosarcoma team lab present to the family funds group on a biannual basis, on an annual basis, we want to make that work. If we know that there's so much crossover that I can probably bet that there are people who might be on an osteosarcoma team who would attend the Factor conference. So if it's appropriate to give an update, then we can do written updates, we can do virtual updates, we can invite you all to the Foundry. We want to make it work for you. We want you to feel a part of this community. We are not trying to take money and run. It's not our in our DNA.
Yeah. Christina,
So it doesn't give a super concrete answer, but I think we want to get to concrete over the next few months.
Christina and folks, I have to drop off in just a second, but I think this is so exciting, and we're really humbled at your teamwork and helping us. Actually, you're doing the work. We haven't even started yet, so we're really humbled at your interest, and we think this is going to be really great. There's a lot of hard work ahead to define the team and the goals and then do the work, but I think having this community kind of organized is, I think, wind at the sails of the team and for us as well. So we really appreciate all of that.
Thank you
Jesse,
both.
this is Rob Marsh. Sorry about that, Christina. Sorry to talk over you. Question that I guess comes to mind is one of the family funds is with the size of money that we are potentially going to commit to. It's a small amount relative to the bigger number that you're needing to get. How is it that we make a difference with it being a small number? Just out of curiosity.
I think Lisa, maybe you probably have the best frame for this. I think there's the dollars piece, but then there's of course all the enthusiasm and passion and shared experience that's just mission critical for the activity. So Rob, I wouldn't measure your impact in terms of dollars. I'd measure it in terms of enthusiasm and passion and pushing. I don't know if Lisa, you would answer the question the same way.
I would answer it. I thought that was a beautiful answer, and we need you. Every dollar makes a difference. This all adds up into something magnificent. And it's, you know, it's the same way we might think about one investigator. One investigator can do a finite and extraordinary amount of work. One donor can do a finite and still extraordinary amount of work. But it's when everybody comes together that we make a really big difference. So we don't want to do this with just one person, this is a community. So we're honored to have people giving at all levels. And
And
participation is giving as well. Moral support is giving as well.
And I'm going to drop off, but Rob, if I had to guess, the project would likely involve a number of aspects of patient engagement that can't be done by the scientists, have to be done in partnership. So there may be some sweat equity as well that we'd ask your help with along the way. And I just think you guys are the ones who can help pull that off. Just if my interactions with other rare disease foundations or any example.
Appreciate the answer. Thank you.
Thanks
I'm
so
gonna
much.
hop. You guys should keep on, and I'm always available if anybody has any questions. But you're in good hands with Lisa.
He
Thanks
has to go. I can talk all night.
You guys have any other questions for Lisa? Thanks for that, Rob.
I'm happy to answer any more questions. Anne knows, literally, I could talk for hours.
Plus you're the super fun one.
I'm the one who thinks all meetings should have Diet Coke and cinnamon rolls,
Yes,
or wine and cinnamon rolls.
yes. Warm cinnamon rolls, please.
Alright.
I did not make that up. That was a real thing.
Oh, I know. Girl, I know.
Now I'm gonna be crazy about. All right, guys. Well, if you don't have any other questions, I will let you guys go because I know it's already late on the East Coast.
Christina, two things. First of all, I put my direct email in the chat. I hope you'll feel free to reach out to me. Anything, there's nothing too small. Sometimes I'm slow to answer email, but I'm trying to be I'm trying to be better. It's just because of a full inbox. And the second thing I wanted to say is thank you for adjusting your schedules for us today. We really appreciate it.
And by the way, Lisa will be at Factor, and I think
So excited.
might be at Factor, so you can also chat with her in person.
And I'm
Um,
assuming there won't be any apples.
Maybe have a cinnamon roll with her.
Unless one is, you can have one.
Great. And so thank you, Lisa, for sharing those docs. We'll share out a recording of this and the docs to you guys and to the rest of the family friends who weren't able to end live. So, and any questions, feel free to reach out to me, to Anne, and Lisa's provided. Well, I'll share out her email as well. So,
Thanks,
all right.
everyone.
Thank you so much, Lisa.
I'll
Appreciate
see y'all next month.
it. Family funds.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay,
Have
good
a
night.
great night.
Thanks, Lisa.
Bye.